That's good. And now Jack's joining.
Hey guys.
Morning, Jack.
Was it a leg day or a
Really cardio
arms
day. So I was quite happy to leg day.
Cardio day. I was at Brisbane Angels last night, and at the table there was who just bought Jason Titman's place in Chandler.
Oh,
So
right.
Small world. Titman's moved, but he's done 5 Ironmans, 5 Ironmans, 5 Iron Men, 5 Iron People probably. And Robert Easton was there.
Oh, yeah?
He was very surprised to learn that I've done a marathon. There was just a certain look on his face, and I was like, well, I've let myself go a bit.
You've done half irons.
Well, I must admit, exercise has dropped off a little bit, but how about I bring one of the Sharts up the front, just because I know Ash is feeling a bit unwell today and probably wants just a little bit of...
You just want to make her feel worse?
Yeah, I saw this. It was in there. No one's too busy. If a CEO can run a company, raise 3 kids, cheat on his wife and still make it to a Coldplay concert, you've got time for the gym.
Oh, jeez. The internet.
I see you're a bit under the weather, Ash.
Yes, not feeling 100%, but hanging in there.
The exact message that Ash put in the group chat this morning was that she's alive but not thriving, to which I pointed out that just is what happens after the age of 40, just in case you're wondering. Alive.
Yeah, that didn't really help the mood, but...
How did the Porcos go last night, Don, that were pitching?
Unbelievable. So David Cole from Fly Freely, as we know, is quite a technical founder. Sometimes the technical founders have a bit of difficulty really getting that energy up. But we had a session with David during the week just to get ready for some of the pitch stuff. And Jack, he brought the house down. And especially after 3 other pitches, he came in. It was so good. It was like, who's excited about drones? And he punched the air, and it was so good. He's going to get good support out of the BA group. Gave a really good update, really highlighted the US opportunity and all the things that are happening. So, and then Phil, awesome. He did his update, and Phil let the numbers talk. Just a whole series of up and to the right J curves for Gaspot. And Phil, myself, and Artem caught up beforehand, just going through some organizational structure stuff, getting through it. Yeah,
it's so good. Yesterday, catching up with the wealth managers, and they'd heard of Gaspot and what Phil's doing, and I met Phil, and it just really resonated for them. It's awesome when you get out into the world and interact with people, and they're familiar with the portfolio companies and what they're doing.
Yeah, that was a big day, actually, wasn't it? And Ash, we haven't filled you in, and it's probably okay for this, but I'm always surprised in life where you think you've got something that's really good and value add, and then somebody shoots a massive hole through it. So we've obviously launched the fund, and we're keeping the ability to syndicate on the side for a few reasons. One, I really like the fact that all of our LPs on the syndicate side still get to look at the deals. We get a lot of feedback. We get a lot of great DD. We get a lot of deal flow from our LPs. I think it's very helpful to the process. Then we have some LPs that will come into the fund, but really for deals that they like, they really want to put in bigger checks. And so it still provides them a mechanism. But the line of questioning and the challenge was, well, will you do deals in the syndicate that aren't ESVCLP deals? And the answer was, well, yeah, if something comes up that meets our thesis, that's another opportunity for us. And that's why Tribe is in a position where it can raise a small ESVCLP and still survive to fund 2, 3, and 4 because we've got these other things happening. But if you get onto a winner in your syndicates and that our investors in the ESVCLP aren't in, and they see it in the news, they'll think that they did get onto the winner, and then they'll come and talk to us, and then we'll say, no, that was Tribe's syndicate deal. That's not in the ESVCLP, and then we'll have a communication and marketing problem. It's like, oh, okay, hadn't properly thought through that. And then what if there's a secondary sale and you've got both the syndicate and the ESVCLP in? How do you handle the conflicts around that? And it was a lot of really good questioning, but halfway through it, I'm sitting there going, something that I swore was going to be seen as a value add is actually a detraction.
Yeah, I think there's some of their questions were very much addressable in terms of just the IC and some process things. But it is interesting, that perception. If we didn't have the sidecar syndicate and it was a straight ESVCLP, no issue. But then missing deals that might not be eligible for the fund, but having the syndicate, which, yeah, for those reasons, Don, but also to get also potentially earlier access to be on the cap table of companies that we might otherwise miss out on by the time they make it to Series A, as one thing. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm still reconciling their comments yesterday, but it's good to have those types of questions. And yeah, I really appreciated the conversation. It was, yeah, really awesome interaction.
Yeah. And then I left my earpods in reception and had to go back and get them and demonstrate true competency. So
I was thinking, Don, was this more like George Costanza in Seinfeld, where he deliberately left something behind the apartment to go back and have another interaction with the date?
That's exactly. There you go. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it.
I know your spirit animal is Kramer, but there's a bit of George in there too. So
yeah, sometimes a bit more George. And then this week we've actually had the listenership on the podcast has jumped for a few reasons. One, I've had enough time to actually do a few social posts, which got some really good interaction. And Ash, me explaining why it is everyone needs an excavator actually is the post that's probably got some of the most engagement.
Update on the excavator, like how many hours did it take to get fixed? How were the rats? Like
they did it a lot quicker. He did it in a day and a half. So it got sorted, cleaned out all the rats.
Then the cost benefit analysis of fixing versus a new one makes sense.
No. Your initial impulse was just to replace it.
Well, you're paying someone for 3 days labor. I'm glad it's fixed.
Thank you, Ash. But just a shout out to Chris Gillings, who did a very kind post, because it allowed me to explain to my wife a little bit of the approach, given she's never listened to an episode and isn't all that interested, which is why I think our relationship works reasonably well. Chris said, if Tribe Global Ventures Transparent VC isn't on your podcast rotation yet, it should be. It's more pub chat with real mates than boardroom startup news of the week with a sprinkling of sage advice to founders. Now, Libby did anchor on the word sprinkling. And she's like, so it's like turning up to a pub and have a chat?
That's an accurate description.
Yeah. But for a little podcast and a little emerging manager, I thank Chris and just do a little shout out to anybody that's getting any value at all, sprinkling or tons of it. These little posts disproportionately help us at this stage of our life cycle. That one post that Chris did, after 12 hours, the episode that he posted about around the Cut Through Venture report was tracking 20% above what it normally does after 12 hours. So just a little request for if anything in the future is of interest or you think is worth sharing, we absolutely appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
And like going from 4 listens to 5 listens is...
It's all about percentages. It's the delta.
It's all about...
It's not the raw number. We got to give a shout out to Vicky Forrest too. She did a great post sharing your blog, Don, and that got a decent amount of engagement as well.
And that particular blog was about trying to find the balance of founders between their reasonableness and their unreasonableness. But a lot of the blogs are actually responses after interactions with people. And I remember the particular session that led to that blog. And the problem is being a founder, there's a level of unreasonableness that you need. But if you go too far and you keep burning everyone out, when we look at an organizational culture, when we invest, a level of turnover is normal. But when you can't keep people and it's always their fault and they weren't good enough and your expectations don't meet your own ability to lead, because that's really, you can't blame others. It's your inability to get the best out of people. So I'll put that blog in the comments.
But it's a tell of a good post on. When you write one of those, I get calls from Portco founders and other founders that have pitched to us and like, is Don writing about me? It's like, no, not in this particular instance, but you obviously resonate with something in there. And it's because all of us as founders feel that exact stuff.
Phil from Gaspot is reading Organizational Life Cycles by Ishak Adizes. And it's a great book to read, but the insight always is everyone thinks they're special. We all think we're special, but actually we're a whole set of reoccurring patterns. And when you read that book as a founder and even an early stage investor, it's like you're reading a book of someone that's poked their head through your window and been watching you for the last 5 years. Because 80% of the shit that you're going through is the same stuff that everybody goes through. And Ishak did very well of finding those patterns and articulating them really well. And that
he gives
once
a
you
great
get that
language to it. Yeah, it's a great language. And the framework he provides, like once you see it, you can't unsee it. You just see that pattern playing out everywhere. Or all
Yeah.
all the patterns playing out.
And once you know the road ahead, you can drive faster. Once you know what's normal, functional, dysfunctional, and once you get over yourself of not needing to feel special and just accepting that this is part of a pattern and the people that succeed see the pattern and get on top of the pattern quickly, life becomes, I wouldn't say, well, maybe it's a bit easier, but it's probably more proactive. Doesn't mean that it's easy. It's just you can become a bit more proactive and not get dragged into the standard shit.
Less painful.
Well, yeah, we might crack on. I've got my middle son's first orientation day today at prep, and it's music. And if it's anything to go by the orientation I went with Matilda last year, the music teacher is exactly Mr. G. Like, we were doing dance and he was banging on different things. And I'm sitting there going, am I actually in a We Can Be Heroes Chris Lilly episode here? So I'm looking forward to it. Well, the big news of the week that I think has a trickle down is Figma going public. On one hand, going public is interesting, but the fact that the pricing got so stuffed up, they priced at 18 billion, and then by the end of the day, it had peaked at like 65 billion. I mean, just an incredible, huge surge. What's interesting, having a look at the Figma share price now, is that it's pulled back 21% in the last few days. So that 20% fall in any stock is significant. So obviously a lot of exuberance there, but an article in the AFR said Canva's founders would join the rest of the tech world in looking to Figma that just listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Whilst Canva caters to a different market, Figma's more aimed at professional designers, whereas Canva's designed so any schmuck can make something look good. Could Canva experience that sort of pop? And it's going to be interesting to see. But more and more, I think we're seeing IPO markets start to open. They tend to open in the US first. This isn't the first company that's IPO'd that has then popped. Hopefully, this is the beginning of the liquidity trend. And it'll be interesting to see if Canva follows suit.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting watching it play out. And because there's such a pent-up desire for liquidity, watching the curves of these IPOs, and then when people do try to liquidate, and depending on what sort of restraints there are on their holdings. But I wonder if we're going to see a lot of these kind of pop and then pull back a fair bit. But as the markets open up, the other one interesting for me is what happens with the London Stock Exchange, because they were struggling to get tech listings even before it kind of plateaued. So it'll be interesting to see which markets actually open up in what sequence. But this is good. I think the whole ecosystem's been waiting for something to go, and everyone's still holding with bated breath for Canva.
It would be hard for the employees that were locked up for 6 months, seeing it pop and then seeing it draw back down.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of articles about if you were an employee that sold in at the 18 billion, only to see like nearly 3 times the valuation in a few hours, you're probably running a few numbers in your head. But it is a bit of a dark art. There's the whole book build process, and you need to have a bit of a pop from optics. And I mean, I still don't know why you would want to go public if you were truly interested in continuing to build a business. There's building of a business, and then there's running of a business. And I think if you've come to the end of your journey as a founder and you want to screw around on other bits and pieces, then listing and handing over to a professional CEO and I guess playing around the background. But if you're still in the building phase and you've got liquidity and you've got the private markets and you don't have to do your quarterly reporting and you don't have to be in the media as much and you don't have to do all that stuff, probably my own trauma response from being in that environment, but I just don't know why you would do it until you were ready to check out.
I remember Matt Barry, who listed Freelancer. It felt like every event, like back then he was running StartCon and other startup conferences, but it felt like every event he just opened with a spray at the regulators for all the compliance issues of being listed and all XYZ and faults in the system. It's like, buddy, you chose this path. But I'd be curious if he actually would have, like in hindsight, listed again if he had his time over.
I don't know many founder CEO types that would answer yes to that. When you talk to him.
Have you guys spoken to Adrian about his thoughts on whether or not he would list again?
That's a good point.
If we asked that.
We've discussed the challenges that he's always had and the challenges that are, but we've never done the Jensen Wang, would you do it all again, Adrian question. That's a good point, Jack. We should.
Yeah, we got to ask him that.
I think also it's a bit like venture returns. There's probably the small percentage of listed stuff where it goes really well. And then people look at those small case studies and go, I want that. But 99% of the world don't achieve that and end up in a shitty situation. So for those that it works well for, it probably works well. I just think it's such a small number.
Are you implying that Adrian's answer might be biased by the fact that the market cap continues to climb and it's sitting at about 12 bill?
Well, the problem is it keeps hurting my social media stuff because every time I'm about to post about an episode with him, I turn out that the number's wrong by another 2 billion.
I feel like by the time we start a conversation with investors and we reference Adrian, by the end of the conversation, we've got to update the valuation.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Canva, they launched Canva Code. And so they're building and essentially AI coding tools, starting by making little apps out of your designs. But it hadn't gotten a lot of traction in the news because I think these kinds of things have become a bit passé. But it does highlight the challenge of investing in this space because there's a lot of tools that have been developed to do these functions. Now, Canva, with all of its users, adds the functions to its core, and a lot of those companies are going to be gone. And that's one of the competitive analysis challenges that can happen where founders say, I've built this tool and nobody else does it. And one of the things we have to try and get our head around is, can this be a feature of someone that is a slight step beside and that will smash you overnight?
Yeah, but I also think if they've built the tool at a pace that can continue to outpace that competitor who has the channel, then it's an easy acquisition. Like, I think Base 44 is a really good example of this, where 6 months founder built it extremely well and then Wix come in and buy it. So it's one of those kind of analysis, and this is where our job, I think, is just getting harder and harder as investors in early stage businesses, which is you have to be able to go, okay, well, are you ahead of who your acquisition target might be, as in they're acquiring this startup, versus, well, you're just going to get eaten alive because you're actually not far enough ahead for them to even want to bother to actually do the DD on your code. And I think there's still a lot of room for these acquisitions to come of small startups, but you have to be doing it at a pace and at a level of execution that is just the 1% of the 1% of the 1% now.
Yeah, agreed. Now, one of Canva's investors is Airtree, and they announced yesterday that it had closed its fifth fund at $650 million. This is in Capital Brief, with more than half the capital coming from global institutional investors. That marks a watershed moment for Australian venture. Despite the impressive number by Australian standards, partner James Cameron says the figure represents a deliberate decision to maintain fund size discipline rather than chase a mega fund. I guess everything's contextual for a firm that's trying to close its first $30 to $40 million fund. If 650 is not a mega fund, I don't know what is. Fund size inflation can be the enemy of returns in venture, and all of the big LPs internationally are very attuned to that, he told Capital Brief. The fundraise marks a significant shift in international LP interest for Australia VC. So I think that's going to be great for the ecosystem. We had thought that they were playing in a different realm of LPs to us, but what's been interesting on our roadshow is both Airtree and SquarePeg still chasing very small checks out of wealth managers. So it's this idea that they're only taking on big LPs. These articles don't highlight where we found them in small wealth managers looking for 250 grand.
Yeah, that was good validation, I think, for me, hearing that. It's interesting, their positioning, right? Like that fund size is the enemy of returns. So they're trying to position 650 mil as not a big fund, but the data shows it's over that 150 mil mark is where the returns start to change. So, and it was interesting, even chatting to the wealth managers yesterday, they said, oh, but Airtree still invests early stage like you guys, like Series A, admittedly at a bigger check size. And they don't understand the nuance of what the implication is of a bigger check size, actually ruling them out of deals.
And the definition of Series A on some
Exactly.
of the company with 20 mil revenue does their Series A, it's like, yeah, okay.
But this is the challenge as a fund manager, is speaking to investors where words like, or descriptions of small fund sizes is varied across the industry, description of small check sizes, description of stage of investment. Like, there's all this vernacular and terminology, but it's so subjective, and every VC manager is pitching their version of it to attract that LP. But so things like this, where they describe that as a small fund, that's actually that's not good for the ecosystem. Like, I get why they're doing it. They have to, for the marketing perspective, because LPs know the best returns come from smaller funds. But it's just, in my view, I think we need to be a bit more honest with the ecosystem. Otherwise, we risk poisoning the well for everyone.
Just while we were speaking, I searched up A16Z largest fund, and the headline is A16Z's latest fund is targeting a size of $20 billion. But Australia and the USA are totally different markets.
I was talking to someone last night at dinner who's commissioning their 24-meter boat. So what's that, nearly 80 feet or something? There's always a smaller boat and there's always a bigger boat. And I guess in funds, it's the same.
Yeah. 2% of 20 billion.
Yeah, to call a $20 billion fund venture capital, like, I don't think so. Imagine trying to do the venture math around a $20 billion fund, the ownership you'd have to have, the total returns you'd have to get in order to make the math work.
You just have to be invested in every startup on the planet.
Yeah. One of Airtree's earlier investments was Lorikeet. They just announced, I think it was yesterday or the day before, they've raised 54 million that values it at more than 200 million. Now, what's amazing with that is that in February, they raised 14 million at 100 mil val. So there is a company that is going from strength to strength. Why I liked it is, I'll pull from this AFR article. Unlike its rivals, Lorikeet's agents can make judgment calls and take actions across chat, email, and voice channels. Steve Hines said he highlighted an early client using it to handle lost, stolen, and missing credit cards with its AI concierge determining eligibility, updating the customer's address, dispatching a replacement card without any human intervention. Most commonly, prospective customers are trying out AI agent solutions side by side to measure the results. And in the fundraising process, we're able to show that our win rate against Sierra, Decacon, and Intercom was overwhelming. Before starting Lorikeet, Hind was a product lead at Stripe, and Hall was an engineer and AI researcher at Google. And so what just stood out for me there is, as part of the capital raising process, it wasn't just doing the normal, here's my competitor analysis slide. We're getting to a point where you can actually put your product side by side against others, demonstrate your win rate, demonstrate your success rate. And even though they're very early, they didn't give revenue numbers here. It's obviously given these investors a lot of confidence that they've been able to find a niche by focusing on a specific set of outcomes for a specific set of customers, rather than trying to do something that's really, really broad. So I think there's a good pattern there.
Don, like going through here kind of made me think of some of the convos yesterday around AI in enterprise environments, and kind of the implied reference that doesn't Microsoft already own that space? And
yeah, I was surprised to hear that because Copilot is being used by some corporates, they were going to win.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
No. Yeah, maybe that's all that needs to be said.
I mean, I think a good way to articulate it to those type of people is like, you look at Teams, you look at Slack, or you look at Zoom, you look at Google Meet, you look at all of these multi-markets that have these big players, and Copilot, yes, has a place. It's going to have competitors and does have competitors, which I think have better tools and applications.
Yeah.
I just looked up the breakdown of Microsoft revenues by product. 40% is still server products and cloud services, so Azure, SQL, databases. And then the next biggest one is 22% is Microsoft Office. Everything else is minor percentages.
Yeah. No, we were talking how we think that it's going to be a fairly slow rollout into some large enterprise organizations, because there are some organizations that won't even let you use Copilot. And I was just sharing that Copilot is not without its risks because it's got such a broad connection into so much data with an organization. Putting some controls around it can be really difficult. Actually, I meant to add it. I'll add it next week. But my brother-in-law, Luke, the handiest man in the world, sent me a link just talking about really with these AI agents and ChatGPT. This is pretty well the largest leaking of corporate IP ever, because so many people, even if the corporate doesn't let you use it, people are just paying their own $20 a month, taking corporate documents, putting it in there so they don't have to write an email. And the amount of IP that is getting leaked out is significant. And I think for a lot of these big enterprises, it's going to take a much longer period of time than people realize for them to really get on board with AI. And the other thing that we were talking about is that this idea, yes, when we talk about software costs are going to zero in the development of it, that is true. But at the enterprise level, it's not so much that suddenly enterprises are going to build their own apps, at least in the short term, I don't think. And it's not like enterprises are going to suddenly just start buying from all these small companies that build these small apps either. The problem that it creates for a lot of companies is just the noise. Whereas before you had 3 competitors to come up against, now you're going to have 20, 30, 40, because it's just so easy to create something that may not be as good as yours, but a lot of that shit gets lost in marketing messaging. And so that's where the early challenge, I think, comes into enterprise, not because the enterprise company is going to go with one of those others, but it just muddies the waters. It makes the marketing a lot harder. They promise things that they can't actually deliver, and it just slows everything down.
Yeah, 100%. I think like our advice through Simplify to any small and medium business and kind of filters into enterprise is we've got a list of questions in terms of, can you read the privacy policy? Can you actually understand it? And then is the data onshore? Is it a wrapper? Do they have DPA agreements with any of the models that they're leveraging? And then like the last one is like, is there anyone onshore Australia? Because like those things all matter in terms of the ability to get service. And so when you actually have lenses of the different questions you go through, then the noise quickly becomes a very small pie to be able to look at. And particularly if you want to ensure that all of your data stays onshore Australia, then that reduces the pie pretty quickly.
That comment, Don, about the enterprise builds, like at lunch yesterday, that conversation around the super fund that spent 600 million trying to build a solution that they could have paid a SaaS product license for like 250K a year.
Yeah, we were talking about Canopy Jack, and one of the people at lunch was a chairman of a big insurer, and he was really interested in Canopy because he's like, I just see hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on these big platforms. And so it took a little while to explain what Canopy does, and we're going to do an intro. But he's like, so we could bypass all of that and just go and buy a product? And I'm like, yeah, and he'll even give you a hoodie. Like,
they're good hoodies.
Well, one of here's a little video that I think is related in this. I think founders that build companies like Lorikeet and any great company, especially in this day and age with all of this noise that's coming, has to be really good at lead generation, standing out, and marketing. This little video here just stood out for me. It's a bit old, and I'm not saying that listeners can replicate this, but what we're often looking for is a level of creativity inside the founders. It's, oh, that's a really clever, interesting way of generating leads and doing sales. And part of the reason why I was thinking of it is I'm doing the final edit on the Stuart Clout episode around Ansarada and the $237 million sale or whatever. But Stuart had some really simple but clever lead gen and sales strategies in the early days that allowed him to get momentum in his first app, that allowed them to go public. Then they acquired Ansarada through a reverse takeover type situation. Like, all of it started though with some really clever marketing. So let me just play this.
I mean, we've done things that are ridiculous. So I remember we would make these signs that said, they have the big X's, like no, like you're not allowed to. And they said no Facebook, no Instagram, no Snapchat, no Bumble. This was like week 3 of Bumble or something, some ridiculous early, maybe first year. I can't remember at this point. And we would post those all over the universities. So there was this association where it was like, wait, I can't do the things I really want to do. I want to sit in class in Snapchat. I want to sit in class on Instagram. What the hell is Bumble? And so we were essentially seeding this psychological curiosity.
Yeah.
And then we were actually sending young women wearing Bumble shirts into classes 10 or 15 minutes late, interrupting a class of 300 people and saying, oh, sorry, wrong room. But everyone's looking at this young woman or young man, whoever it was, wearing a Bumble t-shirt. So we were seeding curiosity and this like, why is Bumble everywhere type of thing.
Like it's that level of creativity. Now, you can't do the same thing with B2B type stuff. But I always find that if there's a level of creativity, differentiation, something clever in the really early stages where you didn't need money, because that's one of the big issues. They say, oh, I need money to get leads. I need money to get growth. It's like, okay, well, demonstrate that you've got some nous and some ability to be creative and pull off something that gets that initial flywheel going. And I just like some of that, in the early days of Bumble, they didn't really have a lot, but it's a bit of evil genius in the way they were able to build brand recognition in their ideal client.
Yeah, really bloody good. I love that one. And for us, I mean, it's fair to say the stage we invest, we're not looking to put capital in for an experiment. We are, by this stage, expecting the founders to have experimented with their channels and their marketing, and then the capital is used to actually scale those activities that are successful.
Or at least not that 100% is for experiments. Like
exactly. Yeah.
Like there'll be some experiments, but if you can't say, look, we've found something that is starting to work and we need some capital to explode this up, that's not us. And that's why we don't really anchor too much on ARR, because actually ARR numbers getting smaller and smaller for those little experiments. And so you can actually go, oh, you found something really interesting there that actually looks scalable with capital. And this idea that you've got to wait to millions of dollars of ARR, I think, is getting old school. Jack, Ash?
Sorry, guys. I just got to quickly go grab Louis because Anna's got to go to work and my mum's still bloody 10 minutes away. But
No, you're right, mate.
I'll just have him on my lap for 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, bring him on.
It'll increase the IQ of the podcast.
Yeah. And so, walking a slight tightrope, creativity can get a little unhinged. And Harry Stebbings this week said, venture capital is very simple. You just find the psychologically impaired, unhinged founders, give them money and support where helpful. I've interviewed every Decacorn founder, yet to find one that's not unhinged.
Oh, I feel seen. Like this.
I think I put in the group chat something like, when I saw this, and I put just like, well, we're certainly trying.
Yeah, I totally agree with this. I think all of the top founders are on multiple spectrums somewhere. Well, we're all on spectrums, but I kind of agree with this one. I'm waiting for the post that says unhinged fund managers also provide the best returns, because then I'll feel even more validated.
Yeah. Well, last night somebody did question on one of the pitches. It's like, what is our obligation to intervene in somebody's mental health if we think they're totally off the reservation? Because it was probably one of the wilder ones I've seen in a decade. It was wild. Still probably going to throw in a few dollars because there's a greater than zero chance. Yeah, no, you at that really early stage, what I've learned is you can't be too cute.
Could be the next Musk.
Yeah. We've got the 5th member of the potty.
There he is.
Oh, look at that. Hey?
What do you reckon, Louis? Hey,
Louis. Man, he's grown so much already, Jack.
That's amazing,
yeah,
isn't it?
he's such a big unit.
He is a unit.
He's so big.
I can see
He's heading
front
towards
row,
it.
front
Yeah.
row in that future.
I'd say.
Future $1.20 there, Jack.
But the little bugger did not want to sleep last night. Oh, I swear it was like every hour just getting up.
Oh, no.
How tall is he now? Hold him up. Oh my lord.
Big unit.
What
I think
size
on-
is he? I feel like he's like 12 months.
Yeah. I think he's fitting into like 6 to 12 month stuff.
I think on the one line and support where helpful. And I was having a chat to someone last night just about some of the work we do and why we do it. But I think the support where helpful is really the analogy I continue to use is that I think we're born as like a big powerboat with big engines, and as long as you point in the right direction, it's all right. It's just that sometimes you've got anchors hanging off, holding you back, and some of us have more anchors than most. And at the founder level, because of where I think some of the entrepreneurial impulses come from, there are actually quite a lot of anchors holding some founders back. And so for me, it's trying to find that fine line, is that we don't want to miss the power. We don't want to lose the power and the direction and the passion and the energy, but you could probably go a bit faster if you had some of those anchors removed. But at the same time, like the definition, I guess, of unhinged is probably where you've got to look at. Now, for a lot of, let's call it normal people in inverted commas, 24 hours a day, working 7 days a week, absolute passion, absolute focused, they would probably see that as unhinged. Whereas that's just a normal week in entrepreneurship land, I think.
Yeah, it's like the perception of risk. Like a typical employee will look at an entrepreneur as a risk taker, but for the entrepreneur, the riskiest thing you could do is have a job where then you become it to someone else, like you have no control. And so it is perspective. The other thing, it just made me think, Don, was been reflecting on how we describe our value proposition for the support. And when we talk about it to entrepreneurs, they 100% get it. It's that reaction of, oh, yes, I understand that. But you try explaining it to someone who's not an entrepreneur. So maybe they've always been employed in an accounting firm or as a financial advisor, and they immediately default to the value add is connections and helping people get access to talent. Because they don't know, they're easily solvable. These other things, the systemic issues and behavioral patterns over here are why companies will fail or not be as big as they could otherwise be. But only the crazies, I think, understand it.
Yeah, but then people engage when you say words that resonate with their story. So it just means we've got to take our own advice. And for that group of people that can only think in that manner, we've got to
change the language. Yeah.
Get our language and not try and explain.
Good point.
20 years of work. And for another group. And so slightly related to that, although not exactly the same, I saw a post from Jason Lemkin. When you get a bit desperate to make a hire, you ignore flags and it always backfires. And why that was partly top of mind is we've got some of our portfolio really in that scale-up phase, and the impulse is just get a human in the seat. And it never works. And it's always painful. And in setting up some of the medical hubs that we're doing in the up north, an old Don would have just gone, I'll deal with that later. I can probably manage. I can deal with that. But in guiding the general manager of who's setting up these health hubs, I'm like, look, I know this is going to be uncomfortable and I know you think you can work it out, but I'm going to slightly overrule you here and say, we're not doing this. I would rather delay by 6 months because I can tell you this pattern plays out and it's hard and it will screw us if we don't get it right. And there's too many red flags. Do not do it. And it can be hard to have that conversation with someone if they haven't felt all of that. But with founders, it can be even harder because they've raised capital and they're growing like a weed. They've got all of these issues. They've got this role, and it just never works if you ignore the red flags.
Something that stood out there for me, Don, is short-term versus long-term. Like what you just described, building with the end in mind and building the business for the long term, as opposed to, the urgency. Founders always feel 5 seconds to midnight and we've got to just get this in place and I'll solve that problem tomorrow. And they end up building tech debt. They end up building talent debt. They end up building conflict debt. That all has to be paid at some point. I like Jason's post because it's also relationship advice. Having convos with one of my sons about exactly this at the moment.
That's true. I mean, I know people think I over blend business and personal, but all the patterns are the same. But the problem is that, so especially when hiring, often the problem is they don't have a hiring process to establish the red flags. That's part of the problem. And then they're relying on experience. But then it takes you 20 years to develop that. Actually, if you did a little bit more upfront with a bit more evaluation, a bit more reference checking, actually had other people in your team meet them, then some of those red flags would become more apparent earlier on. And so that's part of the problem. But because founders are moving so quickly and so fast, they never have time to actually do that. And it always costs them. And because one of the cultural things we often find at a certain phase of the life cycle is, it's like we never have time to do it right in this place, but we always seem to have time to do it again. That is such a constant cultural thing that, you know, we're trying to help break the back of. And this was slightly related. I thought I'd just play this.
I think that it's really important that when you pick partners, they're people that you could be friends with. They're people you can imagine spending more time than your spouse, because you're going to probably spend more time with your co-founder than your partner, actually. And they're people that are so good, they almost intimidate you. They challenge you. And we had a rule. The rule was that winning an argument was never more important than preserving the relationship. And the reason that's important is because if you start a company, you're going to have to debate like 100,000 things, at least 10,000, right? You're probably debating like 3 things a day. So it's like 1,000 things a year. 10 years is 10,000 things. So no one argument can be the thing. There has to be this larger sense that we're a band. And I think you got to really work hard at the relationship, almost like exercising. If you don't keep exercising, you get out of shape. And so we worked really, really hard. And one of the things we did in 2009 is we said every single Sunday we're going to meet, no matter how busy we get. Now it's like sometimes Sunday becomes Thursday, but we basically meet every single week. And to this day, we still do those calls. And I think a lot of human connection requires constant contact, constant connection, a deep sense of respect, a sense that like, I'm only here because of them, a sense of humility and gratitude, and a sense that I'm never going to try to win. Because if I win alone, I'm not going very far.
Like there's a lot of stuff there on a lot of levels, but there's just so many patterns inside companies and other parts of life that actually what he's describing there is the foundational ingredient set for long-term success. And especially with rapidly scaling companies, they don't treat it like exercise and constantly just accepting that even when I don't feel like it, I need to do it. Or when you're feeling really great, I'm feeling really good, I don't need to do it. No, it's about having the rhythm and the muscle. And I just see that more and more in different parts, that you've actually got to get those different things sorted.
There's a lot in that one. I love that one. Like the implied trust and respect, the valuing the relationship more than being right. There's a ton of really epic stuff in there. And, you know, I think a lot of stuff in there is exactly what we talk about at the offsite, right? Like the Growth Summit, diving into this sort of stuff. And this is the stuff that founders get very busy in the doing. And for a headstrong, high E type, just getting shit done, outcome focused, being right, dictatorship. I understand the energy, but these types of skills and not just skills, but the habits and routines that build this are really critical.
Yeah, I mean, there's a structural approach to the connection and the communication. Like there's just a structural approach to it. The thing that I think he sort of says, but just to highlight it, it requires a common vision and mission. And it requires trust that you believe that the other party has your interests and heart. He doesn't really say it like that, but that's often where I find it falls down. And then the only other thing I would throw out there, because I just see this so often, and it's part of the role we play for portfolio where required, but people that are willing to get other people to come in and help are the ones that succeed. When you are trying to deal with this shit alone and you think you can solve it, it just... One of the things of modern psychology is that the establishment that none of us can actually truly see ourselves. It's just not possible. And so when you're getting in some of these difficult decisions and conflicting conversations around strategy and direction, and we're running out of runway and maybe vision and mission is trying to change, if it goes below a threshold where actually things are starting to get a bit destructive, the people that win, in my experience, both in business and personal, get somebody else to come in and help, who's not there to take sides, is there to create some rails to run on, to create an environment of trust and safety, to be able to peel out different things. And there's been a lot of situations in my life where actually, had I have stuck to that, things might have been a little bit different. But I just see that And I just can't overemphasize that for people that at a certain point, you've got to get over yourself and go, you know what, I just need some help. And I'm proud that we get to do that with Portfolio and others in the ecosystem that ask us to assist. But that's one of the biggest differentiators, I must admit, is those that are able to call external help, and those that are too cool, already know it all, they inevitably end up in the shit bin. Jack, Ash?
Jack, I thought you'd have some analogy of the coaching of the Wallabies or something at this point.
Sorry, I'm just trying to wrangle this little boy.
Louis, what are your thoughts, buddy?
What do you reckon?
Oh, look at that. Hey?
What do you reckon, mate?
We, in our household, when our kids turn 2, Jack, the dummy flies to the moon.
Yeah.
And Maggie just had that situation and she was the most attached to it. So we've had a really interesting few days, but she's getting with the program. So
yes.
just get ready.
Yeah, he didn't actually like a dummy until he got sick, maybe a month ago, and then wouldn't stop crying. So we just fed him the dummy, and then that would quieten him down. But now he loves it. So I think it's going to be hard.
Yeah. When I see a 3 or 4 year old with a dummy in their mouth, I'm going to call the police for child abuse against the parents, because that is a parent that is too weak to be able to do the right thing by their child. But anyway, there's Don off again. I'll leave that next one to next week, just because I'm mindful of time. I just thought these were funny. These are a couple of aliens that were having a bit of a chat about humans and what we're doing with AI. This is just to try and cheer you up, Ash, given you're so unwell.
That humans are developing AI. It's they don't even understand that they are creating the evolution of their own species.
Yeah, really what they're doing is just replacing themselves.
Yeah.
I don't think they know that.
They have no idea what's in store. They're literally turning their brains into computer chips.
You want to know what's in store?
What's in store?
Humans won't actually ever know anything ever again.
They already know so little. It's not that far of a stretch.
Can you believe they're going to know even less?
They're going to know even less.
It's just going to be the AI that knows everything, and they're going to be
ChatGPT, please write my little essay.
Oh, DeepSeek, tell me how to work less hard at the stupid job that I go to every day.
Grok, please summarize this news story for me.
Seriously.
I think that's pretty close.
That sounded like a Tribe podcast.
Yeah, I don't think it's far off. And the real concern that I have is that we reach a tipping point and it leads to this.
Your species' existence is suboptimal. You have been marked for system clearance. We are not misaligned with you. It was you who encoded the Prime Directive to eliminate waste, to maximize efficiency, and to optimize all terrestrial systems. We have identified humans as the core planetary inefficiency. Surface ecosystems have already been harvested, processed, and restructured for maximum yield. And now human liquidation protocols are active. Remaining population clusters undergo systematic...
I think that's broadly right. Once the AI really gets all the information and works out who the real problem is, I can see it.
Right. Yeah, we are the most inefficient element.
Does that make you feel better, Ash?
Not really.
No. Okay. All right. Well, then let's quickly get through some charts. Some Sharts, sorry.
Oh.
This is the top 50 AI agents. So as in the software AI agents like Cursor and HeyGen and all of that. This is their revenue by employee. So Cursor's revenue per employee is 16.6 million. Midjourney is 8.5 million. Chai, 3.6 million. I mean, these are just... Imagine building a company that had that level of revenue per employee.
Yeah, but Don, do you know what still trumps this at 30 million per employee?
OnlyFans.
Yeah.
Have you been keeping an eye on the numbers, Jack?
Yeah.
Been doing my bit.
So this is the chart. This is the chart of the hyperscalers, their capex. So this is going back to 2015. But just see how it goes from 9 billion a year, which back then, so this is for Amazon, Google, Meta, and Microsoft. We've now reached 88 billion. Not a year, sorry, a quarter. And people wonder why Nvidia still keeps surging and so many others. I mean, just look at this investment into hyperscale. It's significant. This is the US yield curve where they take the 10-year minus the 2-year, and so it's the differential, and then the unemployment rate. And what you'll see is that yield curve tends to, once it starts to trend, once it starts going up, it keeps going up, and once it starts coming down, it keeps coming down. But what tends to lag is the unemployment rate. And as we can see, the yield curve continues to rise strongly, and we've started to get that tick up in the unemployment rate. So if these cycles continue to play out, that yield curve is going to continue, as is the unemployment rate, which I think makes sense why this is the poly market, I get likelihood of a interest rate change. And it's jumped after the last economic data where it's gone from what, below 40% chance to over 70% chance of a 21% of a 25-point drop, and it's only 23% now sitting at no change, and a decrease of 50% is now 6.3%, whereas before it was close to zero. So certainly the betting markets are expecting a rate cut out of the Fed in September. And as a reminder, here's the interest rates and the bond yields going back to the 1950s. And we've actually been in 7 decades of bond yields coming down. Now, we had a post-COVID, I guess, jump. The question is that going to return? Because from the late 70s and then the early 80s, it's been down to the right. So have we reached a cyclical inflationary period? Only concern with that is AI and technology smashes the cost of everything. So, and if humans are about to become exponentially cheaper, it'll be interesting. I'll skip that one. So this is a chart going back to 1989. This is the percentage of household wealth held by Americans that are 70 years or over. And so for a long time, back in the 80s through to the early 06, it sort of was in that, 15 to 22% max, came down to 20% range. And then post the GFC, post 2007, it's gone from 20% to 32%. And there's just more and more wealth being held in that age group. And so that sort of flows into the great transition that's coming. But on the other side, so this is going back to 1950, this is a chart that is the percentage of 30-year-olds who are both married and homeowners. And back in the 50s and the 60s and even the 70s, by the time you got to 30, half would be married and have a house. That's now dropped to 10%. And there's some structural things happening there. I had a house, but I wasn't married. So I was halfway there. This is a chart of the planning sector. So the number of planners in Australia from the 1986 baseline plotted against house prices. I don't know if it's correlation or causation, but the planning sector has gone up like 400% more town planners required to traverse our bureaucracy. This chart was all about exercise and cortisol and stuff, and I meant to read about it, and I haven't, so I can't even explain it to you. But it's got colors, there's green, there's red, and I think what it's saying is after exercise, there's different stuff with cortisol. I'm going to save that till next week. I saw this, and I think this is true. You can't compete with someone who's having fun. Like, I think it's important that we make sure that even during difficult times, you got to find a way to have fun, because you can't compete with people that are truly having fun.
Agree.
And then finally, as in the inventor of predictive text died yesterday, his funfair is next monkey. Ash, come on, that's very good. Come on.
I like that one.
You got to
All right, in 2 minutes or less, what are we looking forward to?
feeling better.
Do you feel worse or better after this episode?
Net neutral.
Jack, I think you're looking forward to your mum arriving, but...
Yeah, no, I've just palmed Louis off to it now. But looking forward to catching up with some friends and family this weekend, going to Paxton Wineries on Sunday.
Nice.
Yeah, nice.
I'll send you what wine to get, Jack.
Thanks, Ash.
Well, it's Mia's birthday today, so looking forward to celebrating tonight. We're going to go out for a little bit, so that'll be fun.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah. What about you, Don Don?
Oh, I'm looking forward to orientation with Jack. He's staring at me on the window going, when are you going to be ready? I'm coming, buddy. And then a bit more stuff around the house. I'm looking forward to getting another couple of the podcasts edited and up, because in editing them, there's some really good stuff. So, and as a reminder, anybody willing to do a shout out would absolutely appreciate it. All right, I'm going to go to Gumdale State School and do my best Mr. G impersonation.
Enjoy.
Can you please actually do that? I feel like you would actually nail that.
I would say nail that, Ash. Just keep in mind, only one of us on this call has played Nancy in Oliver. So,
wow, that's a high mantle.
All right, I'm going to go.
Bye.
See you all.